Welcome to Whispers from the Phylactery, where I like to ramble on about tabletop RPG philosophy, storytelling, and game lore. Today I want to share something that has saved my prep countless times, and that's the 5-room dungeon design method. Whether you're a new GM or a veteran running short on prep time, the 5-room dungeon is a powerful framework to build quick, meaningful adventures with structure and flow without necessarily getting overwhelmed by sprawling dungeon maps or complex encounter webs. So grab a beverage of your choice and let's take a rest to talk about the 5-room dungeon. So what is the 5-room dungeon approach? Despite the name, it isn't always a literal dungeon. The 5-room dungeon is a storytelling structure that breaks any adventure location into five distinct rooms or scenes. These create pacing, tension, and payoff in a neat contained package that aims to feel satisfying without dragging on too much. Also, keep in mind that when I'm talking about a room, most of the time it isn't a literal room. It could be a series of encounters or different portions of an adventure that are linked together by their core. So, rooms can take the form of navigating a noble's ball for the evening, or delving into a more literal dungeon and exploring a forgotten temple deep in the wilderness. The key here is that the rooms are standout scenes in your dungeon, allowing you to skip over the empty hallways or chambers through narrative exploration and get to the proper meat of your session. And once you start really paying attention and knowing about the way it works behind the scenes, you'll start to notice it more in Critical Role or other, especially online games, where the action is always on to the next scene. They don't spend a lot of time shopping. And that's because they follow the 5-room design method of the iconic scenes are the important bits of the session, everything else in between. If that's what your group likes, great, but it's not necessarily as important. The 5-room dungeon was popularized by John Four from Roleplaying Tips, and it has been widely adopted by the community since because of its simplicity. So here are the 5 rooms. We have Entrance with a Guardian, we have the Puzzle or Role-Playing Challenge, we have the Trick or Setback, we have the Climactic Battle or Conflict, and then we have the reward, I speak English good, Reward, Revelation, or Twist. So let's break down each part and talk about how to use them effectively in your game. Room number 1, the Entrance with a Guardian. This is the hook. It's how players enter the adventure space and the immediate challenge blocking their progress. So this could be a literal guardian, like an ogre or a wraithful specter guarding the entrance to a tomb. It could be a locked temple door that requires a key. It could be guards at the entrance to a noble's estate where the party is happening. The purpose here is to set the tone and establish the stakes. It tells your players that this isn't just another stroll in the woods, but this is an important element of the world. So obviously, if they're going to the noble's ball, they know it's important, but it's more if they have found the temple in the wilderness or they've stumbled upon the ogre's cave, where it really sets it aside. So when we're looking to make the Entrance with the Guardian room, we should keep in mind what immediately stands between the party and their goal. And is this challenge a combat encounter, a social obstacle, or an environmental hazard? Starting with this clear gateway gives the party an immediate problem to solve, drawing them into the adventure with purpose. And then, just to reiterate once again, each room doesn't have to be one room. The Entrance with a Guardian could be, if the party is taking over a fort held by orcs, it could be the gatehouse in the adjoining barracks quarters or the armory. They need to gain entry into this fort. That is the Entrance with the Guardian. So oftentimes it can be multiple encounters, or it can just be one encounter if it's a really small dungeon. Room number 2 is the Puzzle or Role-Playing Challenge. After overcoming the Guardian or Guardians, this scene slows down the pace and changes the mode of play. It could be a riddle inscribed onto an ancient obelisk, a diplomatic encounter with a neutral faction inside of the dungeon, or disarming a magical trap, or figuring out how an arcane mechanism works. The key points here is that this stage engages different skills to share the spotlight and encourages teamwork beyond just rolling for initiative. It also prevents dungeon fatigue by changing up the type of obstacle that the party's facing. So if we're going back with the orcs, they've cleared the gatehouse, they're clearing through the barracks. They might run into an issue of there is an older orc sage who begs the party to stop and parley. They want to discuss how they can help them take down the orc warlord that they're here to kill. Whether or not the party agrees to do this, it could also devolve into combat, or it could be just some captured prisoners of the orcs. They're a neutral faction. They might help. Or it could be actually the goblin slaves of the orcs that might want to rise up against their oppressors. Ideas. So, when creating the puzzles or social challenges, I like to kind of do two things. Make sure clues are clear enough to solve with discussion and investigation. My personal goal is if the players need 2 clues to figure out something, I might leave 5 or 6 that utilize different skills. Redundancy is your friend here. What seems blatantly obvious to us as we're planning out our little adventure can be extremely difficult to grasp from the other side of the table. Because it's always frustrating when someone gives you a riddle and it's like, well, we've given you 10 answers. They all seem to fit, but none of them are what you're after. And that leads into point number 2. Avoid puzzles that grind the game to a halt. Focus on the discovery and exploration and progress part of the adventure. If the puzzle is appeasing the lesser noble at the ball to secure a private audience with the host, maybe the staff are whispering of something the nobles brought with them. It could be potential blackmail or an unexpected gift. You want to leave ways for your players to move forward, and in this case, they could try to find whatever it is the nobles brought with them, either to get leverage to make the noble look good, or persuade persuade the noble, or blackmail them into helping. So you want to leave options with puzzles. Always options. At least that's my general take. Room 3, ta-da, is the trick or the setback. Here is where the party encounters a twist or a complication. It could be an apparent ally betraying them, a trap that teleports them back to the dungeon entrance, reinforcements arriving mid-exploration, or a cursed treasure chest or mimic. So, if we're going through the orc fort as an example, I wouldn't have the orc sage or the goblins attack them unless provoked to do so. If the party is being very disrespectful or tries to use them as cannon fodder, then they'll probably side with the orcs instead of the party. But that's a blatant twist, everyone sees that coming. I might have it that the orc hunting party returns. They come into the gates of the captured fort, their brethren are slain, and they set out hunting down the players as they're still clearing the fort. So the twist or setback can keep tensions high, and it prevents it from feeling like a linear checklist. Yes, we have cleared the fort, we have cleared the armory, we have held out the main encampment. Now we just need to find the king and loot the treasure. You just want to give options and introduce uncertainty, reminding people that not everything is as it seems all the time. The world is alive and changing, even if behind the curtain it's a little bit pre-planned. I really like the 5-room dungeon and just the dotted notes in general is kind of what I'm trying to say. Where I don't have everything pre-planned, I just have the overarching basics, a couple notes for each section, just jotted lines, and then I can fill in the blanks from there as we're playing. I might highlight key treasure or key enemies, but other than that, I kind of leave it up to the time. So as a storyteller, we need to think about what kind of twist would challenge your group without feeling unfair. So the setback shouldn't undo all the progress, but it should create new urgency or force creative solutions. Between sessions in dungeons, try to vary up the trick or the setback. There's a small but subtle difference between knowing the 5-room dungeon design as a player and seeing it plainly laid out in front of you if your game master always uses the same setback, or noticing the wizard behind the curtain. We don't want to become too repetitive and expected to make the same moves on our players. So a quick break in our video. If you're liking the content I produce, consider giving a like and subscribe. It helps me know what sorts of videos you like to see and what I should make more of. But interlude over. Back to room number 4. Room 4 is the climactic battle or conflict. This is the dungeon's peak. This is the boss fight or the major confrontation, and it's usually my favorite room just because I like to set up cinematic fights. A battle amidst floating islands in the plane of air, as the party tries to avoid flying elementals while reaching a relic at the center of a pedestal that is several islands away. They need to fight and press on. Or it could be a grim and somber duel outside of a decaying mansion by the sea as the rain pours down and thunder rattles the body with its proximity. If you want to hear more about those 2 particular tales in the games I've run, let me know in the comments. But those are the ones that spring to mind first when I'm doing examples, in that they had a good reception, and I just loved how cinematic it was. Yeah, cinematic's a good word. It sets a good scene for your players if you describe and you go into it and they are weighted with the, I guess, when you've been building it up all session or for several sessions. For other examples, it could be a necromancer performing a ritual, the orc warlord's lair at the heart of the war camp or the captured fort, or possibly a rival adventuring party claiming the treasure that you've been after in the depths of a pyramid. This is where stakes and goals resolve. Combat is the most common approach, but it's not always the only approach. It could also be a tense negotiation for the treasure if you're dealing with other adventuring parties. It could be a social encounter with the host of the ball in a private setting to solicit their aid in the upcoming war. Or it could be a puzzle to stop a dangerous ritual before time runs out. Even if you kill the necromancer, their plan is still in motion. Are you able to stop the ritual? So I like to design this encounter to challenge the party with interesting terrain, minions, or environmental hazards. I really subscribe to don't use a white room. Don't just use an empty room with nothing in it. Fights can be made a lot more interesting with a little bit of elevation or difficult terrain scattered around. Minions that are either slightly different than the normal of what the party's found so far. There's a lot of options that can bring an encounter to a bit more life than just, oh, we're in a 20 by 20 room. We all run forward. We hit them. Ta-da! And then this also applies to social encounters as well. What staff are nearby that might overhear? An unexpected entrance might leave the party on their toes. A small tip, make it feel earned by building tension through the previous rooms. I kind of harkened back to this in a few seconds ago, a minute ago. When you have everything sketched out and you've done your 5-room design, I like to go back and jot down notes that I think will ramp up the specifics of the climactic scene. In the case of the orcs, that might be other orcs or possibly prisoners that were killed by the orcish war chief and left out as trophies. You just want to build this sense of what's to come. Finally, room 5 is the reward, revelation, or the twist. After the climax of the story, give your players closure. This could be the treasure or artifact that they came for, lore about the villain's true motives, or a plot twist that sets up your next adventure. For example, the players find the kidnapped villagers, but some have already been infected with lycanthropy. Or the artifact that they claimed is only one piece of a larger puzzle. It's half of a prophecy blade. Or the villain's dying words reveal a greater threat looming over the realm that begin a new clock. What if the necromancer was dying in his final moments? He whispered, "You fools, now nothing stands in the way of Nubgaroth." Who is Nubgaroth? When are they coming? And what's so bad about them coming? That a necromancer would resort to killing dozens of people. Hundreds? However, whatever the number you want to be. Maybe he sacrificed a city. Who knows? Depends how high a level of the adventure we're going for. Early level, I'd say maybe a dozen. Mid levels, a village. Higher levels, 15, 16. He might have led a cult that wiped out an entire city to raise an army of the dead. Ending with, back on track. Ending with a revelation keeps players excited for what comes next and ties this short dungeon into your broader campaign arc. The best sessions to me are the ones that leave players wanting to keep going or excited for the next game as they follow up on the story. If your players head out saying, "Man, that was great," or "Why can't we keep playing?" Like, "It's only 10 o'clock. Can we keep going a little bit more? We need to find out more about this." It's like, "Nope, doing it next week." Great. Well, next session. Depends. Not everyone can do weekly sessions. Life goes on. But that's the goal, is wanting players to have fun and keep coming back. So why use the 5-room dungeon? Why does this method work so well? A couple points is that it's modular. You can expand rooms into multiple encounters or keep them short for one-shots. It's balanced. Combats, puzzles, roleplay, and twists ensure variety of gameplay. Of course, this doesn't land with every table, and that's part of session 0, where some tables are just more combat heavy and others are more narrative and puzzle focused. So you do want to kind of lean towards those. If your party's not super puzzle focused and players don't really like them, skimp down on the puzzles, make them easier. Or if they're more puzzle focused or combat focused, fights are short and sweet. They happen, they're resolved, and you keep going. They have a narrative focus. There's not fight for a fight's sake. It's fast to prep. You can sketch 5 rooms with a sentence each, then fill in the mechanics later, either before the game or helping give your improvisation a guidance. That's what I like to do. I like to do 2 to 3 sentences maybe. I start with 1, I go back, I flesh it out, and then half an hour later I have a dungeon. And it feels complete. Characters can gain a satisfying narrative arc in just a session or 2 when they complete the mini dungeon. So whenever you're short on prep time or want to focus side quest, I think the 5-room dungeon framework is a really good friend to have in your pocket. I'm not going to say it's the best thing, and it depends on the person. I really like them. I find it gives a little bit of structure when I'm trying to think of a story, but it's not the only way to tell a story. And this is something that a lot of game runners could do and should do, is look into storytelling methods of different cultures and groups. My shelf has a couple books on it that I don't have at hand that detail just overarching story concepts. The hero's journey being one of them. That's the most common one, really, in fantasy. But I want to circle back. Not every game runner has to be a storyteller. And the 5-room dungeon is really good for that. You don't need to have a lot of creativity. You can get very far with a sentence each. If you just pick a theme or a motive and you pick a bad guy and then you build out from there. So that's the 5-room dungeon approach. A simple, powerful tool to craft better adventures without getting lost in endless mapping or encounter balance. I mean, no one wants to go through all 40 rooms of a dungeon and there are only 6 encounters in there. Skip the exploration. You traverse the halls for 10 minutes, finding nothing but whispered ghosts and rubble among the stone or among the floors. As you get near the next chamber, however, you notice an ominous chanting. It's soft, quiet, but definitely coming from up ahead. And as you draw closer, you hear more. You can't quite make out words, but someone is in the next room. 20 feet, 30. You're not sure. The door is in the way, but they're there. What do you do to prepare? Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, if you enjoyed this breakdown and you want to see how I go about creating an actual 5-room dungeon example for one of my games, let me know in the comments. I can always make a video on it and do it in live or real time. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that little bell if you want more tabletop role-playing game discussion, design tools, and GM inspiration. I also have my monster moments where I like to deep dive into monster lore. So until next time, may your rooms be intriguing, your twists dramatic, and your dungeons always memorable. That's our goal. So long, Avengers.